Think for a second, just about the sheer volume of photographs you encounter on any given day. Seriously, if you stop and try to calculate it, the number is, it's probably staggering.
Oh, it's completely overwhelming.
Right. You wake up, you grab your phone, and instantly you're scrolling through a social media feed just packed with images. And then you check a news app, and you're hit with these high-definition photos of global events.
Or even just shopping. You go to buy, a coffee maker or a pair of sneakers online, and you're swiping through 15 different angles of the exact same product.
Exactly. Photography is absolutely everywhere. It wraps around our daily lives like digital wallpaper. But how often do you actually stop to think about what you're doing when you interact with all those images?
People rarely do.
Yeah. Are we just passively absorbing them? Or is there a much more complex, almost invisible relationship happening right beneath the surface? Today, we're going to explore exactly that. We've got a fantastic deep dive lined up for you, drawing from a really thought-provoking scholarly review by Ushi Klein.
It's a fantastic review.
It really is. She took a close look at a book called Photography Reframed, New Visions in Contemporary Photographic Culture. It's edited by Ben Burbridge and Annebella Pollen.
It's a brilliant collection. And what makes it so vital for us to discuss is its core mission. For a very long time, the academic study of photography was incredibly rigid.
Like very traditional.
Highly traditional.
Yeah.
Researchers would sit around and ask, what is a photograph? Is it fine art?
Yes.
Is it pure historical evidence?
Just putting it into neat little boxes.
Right. But this book completely shatters those traditional boundaries. It asks us to look at the unexpected ways photography actually functions in our modern hyper-connected world. It's perfectly designed for anyone looking to understand contemporary visual culture.
Because it takes the conversation out of the museum.
Exactly. It moves it out of this sterile museum and directly into the spaces you and I inhabit every single day.
Oh.
And, the title itself is actually a deliberate nod to history. Yeah, it references the New Vision movement of the 1930s. Back then, the camera was celebrated as this radical, revolutionary framing device that could capture the world in totally unprecedented ways.
Oh, I see.
So the premise here is that we're living through a very similar revolution right now, but driven entirely by digital technology and the networked internet.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we're going to talk about the internet revolutionizing how we handle photography, we have to start in one of the most unexpected places imaginable.
It really is surprising.
Yeah, when you think of a photographic archive, you probably picture a temperature-controlled basement in a prestigious university, right? Curators wearing white cotton gloves, carefully handling fragile century-old prints.
That's the standard image, yeah.
But this book introduces a completely different reality. We're talking about everyday corners of the internet becoming massive, accidental archives. And the first example that absolutely blew my mind comes from an essay in the collection by David Campany and Duncan Wooldridge. They talk about eBay.
Yes, eBay.
Literally, the website where you go to bid on vintage band T-shirts and spare car parts.
It's a huge shift in how we look at preserving history. The review highlights how, years ago, traditional newspapers began selling off their original physical photographic prints.
They just needed to get rid of them.
Right? They basically used eBay as a giant marketplace to liquidate these vast, decades-old collections of press photos. But something entirely unintended and wonderful happened in the process.
Because of how eBay is structured.
Exactly. Because these images were scanned, uploaded, categorized, and made searchable on this massive e-commerce platform, eBay suddenly transformed. It was no longer just a digital yard sale.
It became an archive.
It became an unprecedented, universally accessible resource for studying historical images. Researchers, historians, and everyday people suddenly had a window into a vast photographic history that used to be locked away in dusty newspaper filing cabinets.
It's wild to think of an e-commerce algorithm accidentally functioning as a museum curator, but it goes even further than that. There's another incredible example focused on Craigslist.
The television project.
Yes. An artist named Penelope Umbrico created a project called TVs from Craigslist. She literally just went on the site and gathered photos that everyday people had uploaded to sell their old television sets.
which is such a brilliant concept.
It is, and when you think about it, that's the most mundane type of photo you can imagine. Someone wants $50 for a heavy, outdated flat screen, so they point a smartphone at it and snap a picture.
Just a completely utilitarian image.
Right. But when Umbrico gathered all these images together into one massive collection, it revealed something deeply weird about our relationship with screens.
What's fascinating here is what those specific photos capture without the photographer ever intending to. Duncan Wooldridge analyzes Umbrico's project and points out a very specific visual phenomenon.
The reflections.
Yes, the reflections. When someone takes a picture of a blank television screen, especially those older glossy glass screens, the screen acts as a dark mirror.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The flash goes off, and you see the reflection of the person taking the photo, caught right there inside the dark rectangle of the TV. Wooldridge argues that this is actually a perfect visual metaphor for our modern condition.
Because we're always looking at screens.
We constantly see ourselves reflected in our machines. We peer into these devices all day long, looking for some kind of connection, but we remain distinctly outside of them. The photograph physically proves the limit of our interactivity.
Wait, so by trying to sell an old piece of electronics, we accidentally take a self-portrait of our own digital isolation.
Essentially, yes.
That's incredible. And honestly, really relatable. I remember trying to sell a glossy monitor online a few years ago, and I had to contort myself into this weird side-angle crouch just so the buyer wouldn't see me sitting on my couch in my pajamas in the reflection.
It's a very common experience.
You don't realize you're capturing yourself until you look at the playback. And that idea of capturing things we don't intend to really bleeds into this broader concept that essayist Tina DiCarlo discusses in the book.
Her work on digital collections.
Yeah, she tackles the complexity of these massive digital collections and uses this really intense phrase. She says the digital archive has a schizophrenic relation to the photograph.
It's a very striking term.
It is. Now, when I first read that, I assumed she just meant these platforms are chaotic, like they're trying to play too many conflicting roles at once. Am I on the right track there?
You're exactly right. It's a provocative term, but DiCarlo uses it to describe how the digital archive is forced to juggle multiple, completely contradictory identities at the exact same time.
Like what?
Well, think about a digital platform that holds millions of user-uploaded images. DiCarlo says it acts as a perpetrator, a collector, a voyeur, a producer, a press agent, and a spectator all at once.
That is a lot of roles.
Let's break that down. It's a collector, obviously, because it gathers the files. But it's also a voyeur, allowing us to peer into strangers' living rooms, like looking at those reflections in the Craigslist TVs.
Right.
It acts as a press agent by actively distributing and promoting certain images over others through its algorithms. And crucially, it's a producer, because the way a platform formats, crops, and displays an image actually creates a brand new context for it.
So the platform is actively changing the photo.
Exactly. The archive isn't just a passive storage box anymore. It's an active participant that dictates how a photograph is understood.
It totally shifts the power dynamic. The platform itself is shaping the meaning of the photo before you even really process what you're looking at.
Completely.
And that idea of the platform acting as a voyeur actually transitions perfectly into the second major theme of the book, which feels incredibly relevant to anyone who spends even 5 minutes on social media.
The public and private divide.
Yes, we're talking about the complete bulldozing of the boundary between public and private life. We live in this network society now, and the old rules of what we share and who gets to see it have been completely rewritten.
They really have.
There's an essay in the collection by Teresa M. Seneft titled Hating Habermas, on exhibitionism, shame, and life on the actually existing internet. That one really caught my eye.
Seneft's work is incredibly sharp because it forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of our daily scroll.
It definitely made me rethink how I use the internet.
The review notes that her essay dives deep into the phenomenon of exhibitionism and shame, specifically looking at webcamming and deeply personal, sometimes sexually explicit photographs that are shared in public digital spaces.
And the title mentions Habermas.
Right. To understand her title, she references Jürgen Habermas, essentially the philosopher who championed this ideal vision of the public sphere. The old idea was that public spaces were meant for rational, polite, civic debate.
Which is definitely not the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Senft points out that the actually existing internet is anything but polite. It's a place where intense intimacy, extreme vulnerability, and raw, unfiltered content are thrust into the public eye constantly.
Right. And what really struck me about her argument is how it explains our reaction, or rather our total lack of reaction to seeing this kind of intense private material out in the open.
The bystander effect of the feed.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Have you ever been scrolling through your feed and suddenly you see something deeply personal? Maybe someone having a very public, messy breakdown or oversharing something incredibly intimate about their relationship, and
Keep scrolling.
you just keep scrolling. You feel like this weird passive bystander. Sentif actually explains the psychology behind why we do this.
Yes, her core argument is incredibly profound. She argues that we are fundamentally a culture that has been trained to simply gaze and glance.
Because of television.
Because of decades of conditioning by watching movies and television. When you watch a movie, you know you can't change the outcome of the scene. You're just a passive observer in a dark room.
You can't reach into the screen and stop the car crash.
Precisely. Senef suggests that we've carried this exact same psychological conditioning over to the internet. When people see real, raw, sometimes harmful or shameful actions transpiring right in front of their eyes on a screen, they subconsciously believe they have no actual power to alter those events.
We just freeze.
The screen creates a psychological barrier. We treat real life unfolding on the internet as if it were a television show.
Yeah.
We're completely powerless to interrupt.
We're literally treating real human beings like characters in a broadcast. We just watch, judge for a split second, and scroll to the next scene.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean when we take that passive gazing and apply it to the massive historic events of our time?
It changes everything about how we consume news.
Because if we treat a personal breakdown like a TV show, what do we do with a war or a disaster? That brings us to the third part of this deep dive, which looks at documentary photography and the news media.
The role of the photojournalist.
Right. If photography is supposed to be this powerful tool to bear witness to history, how is it actually functioning today? The review points to a fascinating essay by Clément Charroux about the September 11th attacks.
Charroux's essay, titled The Déjà Vu of September 11, tackles a strange paradox that many of us might have felt but never fully articulated.
I remember feeling this exactly.
The attacks in 2001 were arguably one of the most photographed events in human history. You had professional photojournalists, dedicated amateurs, tourists, all taking thousands upon thousands of photographs from every conceivable angle.
Just a massive amount of documentation.
There was an absolute abundance of visual evidence, and yet Charroux points out that viewers ultimately had the distinct sensation of seeing the exact same image over and over again.
Right. I remember that visual fatigue. But how does that actually happen? With thousands of different lenses pointing at the same event, how do we end up feeling like we're just looking at duplicates?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the mechanics of the media industry itself. The review brings in another writer from the collection, David Hoffman, who offers a searing critique of this exact phenomenon.
What does Hoffman argue?
Hoffman argues that media outlets are ultimately driven by the need for profit and broad, instant appeal. Because of this, photojournalism is often processed and packaged into homogeneous, easily consumable products.
So it's heavily filtered.
The media acts as a funnel. Millions of chaotic, diverse photos go in, but editors select a few that fit a very specific, recognizable narrative. Hoffman says that instead of showing the true, complex breadth of a situation, photography in the news is pushed toward a mean of aesthetics and meaning.
A mean of aesthetics.
Yes, it's a process of converging on the bland. The images lose their disruptive power because they're tailored to be universally understood in a split second, rather than actually challenging the viewer.
Converging on the bland. That is such a brilliant, cutting way to describe it. It's like the edges are sanded off reality so it fits neatly onto a front page without offending anyone's sensibilities.
It makes the news digestible, but at a cost.
It reminds me of how every blockbuster movie poster basically uses the exact same color palette and layout now. And this curation process doesn't just happen with single historical events, it happens with ongoing global issues too.
Like immigration.
Exactly. The review highlights a really interesting study by Andrea Poliano on immigration photography in Italy. Now, strictly looking at this from an impartial, analytical perspective, just focusing entirely on how the media constructs visual narratives, Poliano identifies a very specific formula that the press uses to frame stories about immigration.
He breaks it down very systematically.
He does. He breaks it down into a three-frame model.
Yes, Poliano's analysis is a crucial tool for media literacy. He identifies three distinct visual frames used almost universally by the press: the conspiratorial frame, the humanitarian frame, and the celebratory frame.
So they sort images into these buckets.
When editors and photographers select images, They're almost always slotting the subject into one of these three predetermined visual categories. The conspiratorial frame, for example, might use heavy shadows, night photography, or telephoto lenses that compress large, faceless crowds together to imply secrecy or a looming threat.
It creates a specific mood.
Very much so. The humanitarian frame, on the other hand, zooms in tightly on suffering and vulnerability, perhaps a close-up of a crying child, to strictly evoke pity. And the celebratory frame might highlight a highly specific, smiling success story of integration.
And as Poliana warns, the danger here isn't necessarily the subject matter itself, but what this rigid formula actually does to the people being photographed.
Exactly. Poliana points out that this rigid framing severely risks anonymizing the portrayed people. It strips them of their individual complexity and allows for extreme forms of generalization.
Because they just become archetypes.
In this visual system, the formula draws very little distinction between the nuanced realities of different individuals, blurring lines and flattening out the very real legal, social, and personal distinctions of the people involved. They become symbols rather than people.
Which is a huge problem for how we understand these issues.
And the review notes that this isn't entirely a new phenomenon either. Poliano's work directly updates a long history of critical scholarship. It deeply resonates with a famous 1992 study by a theorist named Havey.
What did Havey study?
Havey identified a very similar triple-stage model used in charity advertising. It just proves that these visual formulas are deeply entrenched in how institutions communicate with the public, dictating exactly how we're supposed to feel before we even read the headline.
It's a really sobering reminder that a photograph in a newspaper is never just a transparent window into the world. It's a highly constructed sentence written by an editor.
That's a great way to put it.
But let's pivot away from the heavy institutional side of things, because the book does something else that I absolutely love. It turns the camera back onto the everyday person.
It looks at the rest of us.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to ask you, the person listening right now, are you an aspirational amateur?
It's a great question, and it's a demographic that has historically been completely overlooked by art critics and historians. Peter Bruce contributes an essay exploring this exact group.
The aspirational amateur.
Yes. He draws on Pierre Bourdieu's famous sociological study of photography from the 1960s, defining the aspirational amateur as someone who is incredibly passionate about the medium.
They really care about the craft.
Deeply. These are people who are very knowledgeable about the mechanics. You know, the type they don't need us to explain f-stops, shutter speeds, or focal lengths to them? They might spend thousands of dollars on mirrorless setups and high-end glass.
But there's a catch.
The key distinction is that they aren't making their living from the photos they create.
They're the weekend warriors. We all know someone like this, right? The person who wakes up at 4 in the morning to hike up a freezing mountain just to get the perfect sunrise shot, purely for the love of the craft.
Just for the passion of it.
They post it to Instagram, it gets 100 likes, and they're thrilled. But it's fascinating that the academic world basically ignored them for decades. If you weren't hanging in a gallery in New York or shooting for National Geographic, your work just wasn't considered worthy of deep study.
Precisely. The traditional study of photography's ontology, its fundamental nature, and being focused almost exclusively on the extremes, high art on one end or raw documentary truth on the other.
Nothing in the middle.
But Buse points out that the aspirational amateur actually leaves behind an incredibly rich cultural trace. You find their influence in the prospering camera clubs that still exist across the UK, and in the pages of dedicated enthusiast magazines like Photography Monthly.
And all over the internet now.
Today, you see it in the highly curated, aesthetic-driven communities on social media. This is a massive subculture with its own rules, its own distinct visual friends, and its own social hierarchies, completely separate from the professional art world.
And it isn't just the gear-obsessed amateurs who got left out of the history books. It's the everyday, mundane snapshots, too. Gil Pasternak has an essay in the book that really hammers this home.
He makes a vital point about the everyday.
He argues that traditional photography studies have been totally trapped. They either stay locked inside the boundaries of the museum, overanalyzing fine art, or they focus strictly on sweeping social and political events.
Ignoring everything else.
Exactly. Pasternak says that by doing this, scholars have completely failed to record how vital photography is to ordinary, personal, lived experiences.
It's a profound critique of the whole field. Pasternak is reminding us that for the vast majority of human beings, a photograph isn't a political statement, and it certainly isn't a piece of fine art.
It's a blurry memory of a child's birthday party.
It's a picture of a golden retriever sleeping funny. It's a selfie sent to a friend just to make them laugh on a Tuesday. These ordinary lived experiences are the primary way the world actually engages with the medium.
It's how we talk to each other.
By ignoring the everyday snapshot, academia has been ignoring the actual beating heart of photographic culture. The book insists that these mundane images, the ones clogging up your phone's camera roll right now, are just as worthy of serious analysis as a Pulitzer Prize-winning news photo.
Because they tell us exactly how we live and communicate. And that is really the magic of this entire collection. As Ushi Klein's review makes clear, photography reframed succeeds beautifully because it moves the goalposts.
It changes the conversation.
It forces us to stop asking that tired old question, is this art? And it starts asking much more urgent, modern questions. How is this photo being used? How is it being shared? How is it being sold or controlled or manipulated by an algorithm?
It reveals the systems behind the images.
It takes the images we completely take for granted and exposes the hidden wires connecting them to our culture. For anyone trying to make sense of the visual noise we swim in every day, this deep dive into these sources is the perfect starting point.
I couldn't agree more.
So I want to ask you directly, what stands out to you? After hearing all this, how will your perspective shift? The next time you're hunting for a bargain on eBay, or scrolling past a highly produced news photo of a global event, or just looking at a friend's selfie, what hidden frames will you notice that you would have totally missed yesterday?
This raises an important question, and it's actually where the review leaves us, pointing to a really beautiful concluding thought. The review compares the insights of this book to Ariel Azule's concept of watching photographs and Tina Camp's powerful idea of listening to images.
Watching and listening.
Notice the specific verbs they use there, not just looking at, watching, listening. It implies that a photograph is never just a static, silent object sitting passively on a page or a screen.
It's doing something.
It's an active event. It has a voice, it has motion, it has intent. So I leave you with this to ponder. If a photograph is something you must actively watch or listen to, how does the very next photo you take on your phone change its meaning?
What are you capturing?
When you press that shutter button tomorrow, what are you actually creating? Does that image become a voice? Does it become a silent witness? Or does it just become one more microscopic, forgotten piece of the endless digital archive?